to the BSFA monthly meeting. I'm Naomi Foyle, author of Soul Survivors and the Gaia Chronicles, and today I'm interviewing Dan Jones to discuss and celebrate his debut novel, Man O' War. A return thank you to Dan for his interview with me back in June. So congratulations, Dan. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. This is a novel featuring a sex robot named Naomi. And I must say I did approach it with, all due caution.
Well, luckily we met after the book was written and published, so yes. There's a disclaimer in there. Yeah.
I did find it intriguing, gripping, highly topical, most rightly, fully fleshed cyber thriller. I would place it in the emerging genre of AI sci-fi.
AI sci-fi.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that sounds very niche.
Well, you're pioneer.
Bestseller in AI sci-fi.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to use your own nifty neologism, I would also fit it under the brolly-bot of feminist dystopia.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. Because I feel you've taken this very disturbing phenomenon that is with us now, of the sex robot. You've acknowledged, in your fiction through your characters, the seductive power that these dolls are programmed, to manifest, to titillate and seduce. But through the eyes of ordinary men and women in the book, you've taken a strong moral stance. It feels to me. So I felt like I was reading at times kind of a mashup of John le Carré. You've got this whole kind of international corporate crime scene going on. Paolo Bacigalupi, which we discussed earlier. I know you haven't read, but obviously I think he's maybe the precursor of this kind of topic. Meeting Kathy Acker, you even move into some kind of experimental prose poetry toward the end. To kind of try and get inside the head of the AI. And then there's this, as I say, this moral underpinning which felt wouldn't displease someone like Professor Kathleen Richardson, who's a very prominent campaigner against sex robots. In fact, I would recommend that people take a look at her campaign against sex robots on Facebook or just Twitter or just Google it. So, lots to discuss, but I just thought maybe we could just start with some background, partly because we will get to a point in which, in order to properly get to grips with the many tentacles of this book, which, as you can tell from the cover and the title, it does actually feature quite a lot of jellyfish. So we might need to get into some spoilers, but just to start, for people, and then we'll maybe let people know when they want to leave the conversation, if they want to say themselves to the book. With some background, so you work in space robotics, you've previously written short fiction and Lacanian cultural theory.
A little bit.
Yeah. So what's been your journey toward publishing your novel? Maybe in particular, could you tell us something about the quite tantalising sounding Perispera project, which you thanked colleagues for in your acknowledgements? Perispera project. I knew I should have asked them how to pronounce all the words.
Yeah, it's... Sorry.
Yeah, and SFF Chronicles.
Oh, right, okay. I'll do Perispera first.
Mm-hmm,
it's Latin. Mm-hmm. It's part of I'm sure some people in the room know the phrase Perispera ad astra, which means through hardship to the stars.
Okay, yes, I see.
And that's the Perispera is the shortened...
Yeah.
The shortening of that, and we gave that the name...
I know it is per ardua.
Not Perispera.
Yeah.
And so the name of the project that I'm working on in my day job, in my real job, is Perispera. Yeah. That's the name of the team of people from various different national space agencies that I work with on a day-to-day basis. We work together to create what's called a roadmap, so a way of getting from point A to point B somewhere in the future, point B being where we can use new types of technology in space environments, either in orbit or on different planetary surfaces. And what projects of R&D need to happen along the way in order to get there. So that's your roadmap. We build the roadmap, and then with help from the European Commission, they provide some funding, and we get industry and universities to bid for that money and populate those projects on the way to getting to where we want to be. And where we want to be is to create more intelligent systems in space using robotics, autonomy, so we can have satellites that can service. Because when you put a satellite up in space, it's got a finite lifespan, it's going to die at some point, it has to take everything up with it, all its fuel, all its power, all of its tools, and it takes up a lot of mass. It's a lot more efficient if you can send up a second satellite to service your various satellites, refuel them, exchange software and hardware, modules, that sort of thing. So we want to get to that sort of stage, and it's kind of happening, but yeah, there's quite a lot of research and stuff needs to happen, and also rovers for the next generation of Mars exploration missions and other bodies in the solar system and beyond. We need more intelligent robots to deliver more science.
So your team are kind of science fiction writers. You say, wouldn't it be nice if we had this? If we had this, then we could have that.
Well,
and then you tend it out to get the engineers who can actually make it.
The phrase science fiction comes up quite a lot, and sometimes we have to bin something and say, well, no, that's just science fiction. And then other times, okay, well, that's a logical step that we need to take. But yeah, it was hugely influential in providing some of the understanding of the engineering backdrop which features in the book. And I didn't want to make it into a hard SF book. That was not really the intention. On the other hand, I felt that some sort of credible underpinning engineering to how these beings might be created was a good idea.
Well, I certainly the idea of this magnetorheological fluids, the blood, the robot blood that is actually part of their kind of programming, I suppose. Yeah, part of their engineering.
Codable blood.
Yeah, codable blood. So it's part of their sort of sexual function, but it's also helping them just basically keep, I suppose, the whole system cohere of the robot.
Indeed, yeah. You asked about SFF cons as well. Then, in fact, at least as influential as my day job. SFF cons is a science fiction fantasy community online, and way before I started this book, a few years, 6 or 7 years ago, I actually had grand ambitions of writing an epic fantasy series. And I wrote the first novel, edited a few times, and gave it to our mutual friend Brian Whitmore, who gave it to B to read and promptly tore it to shreds.
Right, a real beating.
Yeah, he was a real hit about it. Yeah. It's okay. And it really was okay, actually, because I'd spent 3 years tinkering on this thing, and his critique was such that I realised that it was unworkable. There were some fairly fundamental flaws with the book, and that I could spend a few more years probably trying to get it into shape, but I sort of lost the enjoyment of it. So I dropped that, and it was the most liberating. I keep telling Brian this. I keep thanking him because it's the single most liberating thing that anyone's done in terms of my writing for me, because I dropped it and then I just became prolific.
Well, I think it's a great thing, if anyone is out there is kind of working on, novels that have yet to see the light. The idea that you can just leave one behind, as you say, can be very inspiring, really, because you will now arrive at the point, where Snowbooks have taken your novel, and presumably all the work that you did on the earlier novel taught you some structural.
Taught me a lot of things, and actually all the writers I know who've had something published, they've all got some failed novel somewhere at the back of the cupboard that doesn't see the light of day. I haven't met a single one. I mean, I'm sure there are a few geniuses out there who've knocked one out and succeeded first time, but it's rare. It's really rare. And just as rare, it's the ability to let things go and say, well, I failed. And that's particularly hard when it's your first attempt. Because you really wanted to succeed so much, but sometimes, you've got to let it go. But it's worth it.
Absolutely. So, Man o' War, when did the title come? At what stage did the title come? And I don't want to give away the ending because you do give a quite interesting twist on the title, I think, at the end. But to focus on the marine dimension, I think the way you deal with the jellyfish, the jelly fisherman is one of us, as our protagonist really, guiding us through this world. And as a jelly fisherman, he's quite a good jellyfish cook as well. So we see him tucking in. So really, from a Western point of view, that taps into a kind of cultural squeamishness. But obviously, jellyfish is a delicacy.
Jellyfish is a delicacy.
And so,
about the title, I think it came about halfway through the book. The hotel scene, where Diraj and Naomi are trapped up in the I can't remember the name of the hotel now, the boutique hotel Wells Court, I think. And she is accessing the web for encyclopedia-based knowledge on jellyfish, and that's when the title kind of clicked in. I thought, because that's in terms of what the book is about. That's kind of the key. That was always the key scene in my head. That explains what the book is about. The jellyfish, to me, it just felt very obvious that if all the fish, the fish stocks are completely overfished to the point that there is none left, then jellyfish would survive because they're so numerous and they can inhabit parts of the ocean that we just can't reach. So I thought that they're always going to be jellyfish and they multiply like nothing else. I guess it is a little bit of a culture clash, but the recipes that I got actually were based on a meal that I had in London. It's a Korean restaurant, which is you could do it for your next book. Your sequel to Soul Survivors should have jellyfish in. And I had crunchy jellyfish in a Korean restaurant. It's very good. Really, really good.
Well, this is the thing. I'm looking it up. I realised, so you would imagine it's quite flabby. It's got crunchy texture.
If it's and these guys
freeze dried.
Freeze dried and then cook it up with cook it up in a stir fry with lots of aromatics, ginger, chilli, spring onions. Lovely. So and obviously Diraj is going to know about this stuff. It's the principal food source that they have from the sea. He's a jelly fisherman.
And with global warming, it seems that this is actually currently possibly increasing jellyfish population blooms, as they are called. And this is a world, to move on to a question about world building, this is a world that's very much defined by climate change, pollution. We have the domes protecting. If you were to relate your novel to Orwell, it would be down and out in London and Paris, I suppose, because these are the cities that we see. There's no sun. We've got this kind of a very grim existence.
The sun is there, but it's there in Africa. It's not.
There's no sun over the European cities. And then as you say, we moved to Nigeria, to the Niger Delta. So, how much research was involved for you in kind of making this a global novel, if you like, north and south?
Well, it just it just made sense, but everything is globalised now, so it just made sense to me for any near future thriller encompassing these sorts of themes and topics, that it would have to incorporate different types of people and different places, and the black market economy is just as international as the regular economy. So it made sense to have a supply chain, especially an illegal supply chain, that could be traced to China or Lyon or parts of Poland or wherever it comes from. As for Nigeria, my choice, I wasn't going to choose Nigeria to begin with. I was going to choose Saudi Arabia, and there were a few criteria that I had to satisfy in choosing my location for the second half of the book. So when it leaves Europe, and that was, it had to be an oil-producing country. It had to have a coastline. It had to have historical ties with the United Kingdom. And Saudi Arabia. That's clearly the one. And I read up on on Saudi Arabia, and I read about various shady dealings that the UK's had with Saudi, with this House of Saud in the past, like the Al Yamamah deal in the 80s, and that really interesting, all that stuff.
Well, agitated territory.
Yeah, and you said John le Carre, it's that sort of thing. And then I was out with a few friends in my SFF Quans group, and my friend Jeff Richards, I was chatting to him at the bar, and I told him I'm writing this tech thriller that's partly set in an oil field, an offshore oil rig in the Arabian Sea. And he said, "Oh, I used to work on an oil rig offshore in the Niger Delta." I went, "Really?" And so he told me all of his stories about working in the Niger Delta and off the southern, off Port Harcourt and around there. And I thought, gosh, I've just got to use this. It sounded incredible. And the landscape was wilder and somehow freer, because there's the Bight of Bonny and the delta itself. There's so much going on, so much wildlife there as well, that it felt like a really vibrant, aggressive, wild place to set the book. So I spoke to Jeff at length. He was good enough to relate all of his incredible experiences that he'd had there, and so it became Nigeria.
With the river, you can keep obviously the water imagery flowing. I want to talk about Nigeria later, so maybe I'll just put the pause button on that for a second. I do have a question about that. So you obviously done a lot of interviews, research, and then you've got this all your SF kit. I mean, that's really fun, I think.
What SF kit?
Your bits of kit. Yeah, your gear, your gadgets.
I like them a lot. I see what you mean. Yeah.
So there's the Globulet, which is this kind of hologram sort of foam that looks like it's a ball, and it actually kind of floats around beside you. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, so that was really nice. When those go into production, have you patented any of these? The Brolly-Bot,
I'm afraid
which
not.
also is just an umbrella you don't have to hold on to.
I think somebody's beat me to it, and they've somebody in America or somewhere has patented it and put it into production, or at least research, R&D. Yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah, if you've got drones, why not?
Yeah, of course.
Why not
keep your hands free.
Hopefully they won't flip out either. That's the key thing with umbrellas, isn't it? And then these interactive holo posters that kind of sense who you are from, I suppose, a device that you have on you, and tailor advertisements to you. I find that it's just a little, almost it was an aside really, but I found it quite sinister, because I'm already really hating the screen advertising.
It's just the logical evolution of targeted advertising. And it's also in Blade Runner 2049. Denis Villeneuve did exactly the same thing with the giant hologram that reaches down and points at Ryan Gosling. I think it's a fairly good barometer of where we're going to head up with advertising.
It does make you think about the chip, really, the wrist chip. But moving on from there into the robots. So again, I've got a few more questions about robots coming up later on. But just to start with, I suppose because we do have actually quite violent robots here. I mean, these are these sex robots, and yet they also have the capacity to kill and to maim. And I just wondered, coming into that as an SF writer, to what extent would you be considering like Asimov's 3 laws, and in the fact that in the world of the book, would that be, would that be playing a part in any of them?
Really, I didn't pay much attention to Asimov's 3 laws at all. Really, it's funny you say that the robots are violent. The robots are dangerous.
They're dangerous.
They're dangerous, for sure. But they're essentially tools. Whatever the application is, they're tools. So any violence is down to
they're weaponized.
how they're they're certainly weaponized in various ways throughout the book. And at the end, the ultimate weaponization is sentience. And the nightmare becomes true. But it depends on how far artificial intelligence is able to evolve. I think whether the 3 laws, and particularly I think if my science fiction knowledge holds, I think the 3rd law of Asimov's laws of robotics, it's the 3rd law that says robot may not harm another human, isn't it?
I've got them written down. So the first law is the robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Second law, the robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except when that orders would conflict with the first law. And then the 3rd law is actually that a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the 1st and 2nd laws. So
there's an interesting, I think
it can protect itself.
There's an interesting use of the language here, because robotics is kind of increasingly seen as a bit of an outdated description of what's at work here, and robotics is increasingly seen as the sort of dumb mechatronic stuff, so moving, grabbing, grasping, manipulating, and it's as we move towards intelligent systems, which is the use of autonomy, increased decision-making capability, the removal of what's called the human in the loop, so no control from ground station or control centre or whatever. That, whether these 3 laws, and they're not laws because they're hypothetical, whether they actually apply at all, so we don't really know.
I guess they're, in a sense, they're sort of sensible laws to kind of go about controlling potentially, as you say, dangerous, application. Which is why I suppose they've kind of got this sort of resonance, really. They've stuck, haven't they, in this sort of classic, these iconic laws. And also, as I take what you point about robots and the movement on, but, the word is coming from the Czech, isn't it? Robota for forced labour. And that is still very much at the heart, you're talking really about sex slavery. If you're creating emotionally intelligent systems, and as Sir Ingham says at the very beginning of the book, the reason that he's the regulator in London, and Nita Rhodes, who's running part of this corporation trying to develop these emotional intelligence systems, comes to him hoping for regulation, which he denies, because he says, well, if these sex robots have sentience and they have emotions, they will be aware that they are being raped, and we can't countenance that, and that will never be approved here. So I feel like there's still something there still about
regulation. Regulation always takes a long time to catch up with technology. So you always have the capability to do something, but in this particular field, robotics, autonomy, intelligence, before the regulators catch up. And I didn't see why this should be any different. So I didn't want to spend too long with the regulators, but it's the MacGuffin actually that gets the plot moving.
Well, I find it interesting because at the moment the sex robot is completely unregulated and it's not illegal.
That's an example that the technology exists, but the regulators are sort of scratching their heads saying, what do we do about this? How do we regulate this? There's just no way. And so you have to sort of...
But in your world,
work within
the kokeshi have been made illegal. So there has been some kind of thought. There has been some kind of reaction in terms of if this is a projected future from this world, and it does feel very close to ours in its texture and psychology, and culture. Then there has been some kind of moral line being drawn.
Yeah, but I wrote that, well, I guess I see that as a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And you just draw a line in the sand, so we'll make it illegal, we'll criminalise that, we'll criminalise the use, criminalise production, etc., etc. So it's just an easy way out. I guess it's the same thing with drugs. Okay, if you just
there's a strong parallel to the drug argument.
If you just illegalise it, then you don't have to think about it, and it's actually more complex than that. And governments don't like to do complex if they can help it.
Yeah, but there needs to be data, doesn't there? There needs to be data on the effect. James Young, the BBC reporter who reported on the programme Sex, Robots and Us, So I think that most affected him, upset him, you see, he cried on camera, was when he was in Japan in a sex robot factory, and he came across one that was clearly designed to look like a child, small child-like, and so he cried on camera. So an article about that is making the point that actually they're not safety valves. They actually reinforce the behaviours, and they can, in a sense, encourage the behaviours, really, because rather than try to get the person to control, a socially totally unacceptable urge, orientation. It's very deep, isn't it? Pedophilia. It's an orientation. So. So much more sociological research needs to be done before we can make easy claims that sex robots could reduce rates or could reduce the desire for prostitutes. I mean, rape in itself is not so much about sexual gratification as about power over another person. So would you get the same, effect from having a sex doll available to you?
Maybe that depends on how intelligent they are.
Yeah. Well, then but is the intelligence of the rape victim have anything to do with the rapist's desire to rape her?
Who knows?
It was this sort of kind of questions at the arguments of Nita in particular. Maybe I will get into this question because I suppose of all the characters, and I wanted to start with Taraj and Tilda, I think are really effective characters. So, but maybe as we're on this topic. So she's designed this tech. All the Kokeshio are already in existence. They already are. They're in the black market. They already are available to users who have the money. And her argument is if we give these sex dolls emotions, we factor that into their intelligence, then they'll become better companions. Now, as companions, she sees three markets for them. She sees soldiers. Anywhere that soldiers are posted, and that's her anti-rape argument, that if you give soldiers these companions, then they'll be less likely to go out and abuse the local population. Also, just generally, people who come to the underground sex industry, where the Kokeshio are already in existence, so I wasn't quite sure why giving them emotions would make that. She was asking for regulation, but why not just regulate the Kokeshio as they are? Why would they then need to have the emotional intelligence? So and also with Nita, I wasn't quite sure. She's prepared to actually do anything, isn't she? She's, from the very beginning, she's on the dark side, really. She doesn't have an answer to Ingham when he says, well, you're just asking me to create rapists. So where was she coming from, really, for you, Nita?
I believe that Nita is an idealist. I really do think that she probably believes that she is a feminist and a feminist fighter, and she's doing the right thing for women and men, as she says, actually, throughout the world.
Yeah, she says that, but she's intelligent and she's confronted with arguments, and I don't see her giving the argument back. I don't see her giving the counter argument to the level that I could really see. Yeah, okay, I get it where she's coming from.
Well, as we've sort of kind of touched on it, actually, from a really high level, it's really hard to kill the thing that you've created, and you want to see it succeed.
Sure.
And if you've got a vision of where you want to take something, whether it's writing a book or engineering a new piece of capability, and you believe in it, it's really hard to let it go, especially if. Some guy in Whitehall just says sorry.
And I found it credible that when she's offered the money and she's offered the opportunity to develop it by Adam, who's the son of the oil baron, the Nigerian oil baron, and he's the hopeful heir to the throne of this. And I got him completely, because he's got a family kind of vengeance. He's got a family dynamic that he wants to prove his part in. And that's motivating him. And Tilda I get completely, because I see her background. I just felt there was a bit of a screen around Nita's past, really, and her motivations. So, though I also did very much understand as we get to the end of the book, she's just in it too deep to go back. And I got that as well about the kind of the momentum that, I suppose evil deeds. Solzhenitsyn said the line between good and evil runs through every heart, and her heart just seems to be gradually eaten by it.
It's funny, isn't it? When I was writing the various characters, some of them need reference to the shadows of their past in order for their arc to make sense. I never considered that for Nita, because she was always about the engineering. She was an engineer, and she had some political philosophies around feminism and idealism and anti-war messages. But as I was writing her, I just thought she's an engineer, and I've worked with engineers for years, and they're all about the engineering.
Well, maybe that's interesting. Maybe she's in this paradoxical position of being someone who doesn't really have a fully fledged emotional life or emotional capacity. Not empathy, for example, and yet she's responsible for creating emotional intelligence. So maybe that's the contradiction at the heart of Nita, perhaps. Okay, so to move on to Diraj, the jelly fisherman. I mean, I think insofar as a jelly fisherman who's falling in love with a sex robot while on the run from gangland lords and the law can be an everyman. I think he is your everyman, really, isn't
That's
he?
good.
Yeah. So I found.
I guess he's the character who is running around thinking, what the hell is happening? How did I end up in this place?
I mean, he just basically fishes her up from the sea. He thinks she's a dead woman, and then he phones into the police, and then she opens her eyes and sits up, and whoa, the phone calls goes dead, and then within that chapter he realises she's a robot because she starts speaking and needing to be authenticated. And initially, he's got that detachment. He sees her very clearly as a robot, but gradually, especially and this was credible as well, that after he kind of loses everything, he wants to make the best of this situation, so he tries something, he goes out of his comfort zone, certainly out of any kind of experiential zone that he has, really, and gets into deep, deep trouble, loses everything, and then he starts kind of clinging onto her. Which was a very, gradual and believable trial.
I thought you do cling to what you have. You cling to what you have, and also she saves him. Physically,
she does, she saves
and
his life.
emotionally as well. And it's very. I think it's very precarious territory when you're writing a story about somebody being on the run with a sex robot, because I think you could very easily fall into sort of pits of titillation and salaciousness. And I was very eager to avoid that. I didn't want to go there. So. I wonder if it's a too spoiler.
Doesn't it? It comes through a dream, and his first attraction to her is when he's sort of sleeping in the lamb, and he starts having an erotic dream. So it's sort of coming from his unconscious. Really.
It's there, but I suppose, without being too sort of spoilerific about it, the relationship is consummated by the end, but not. Well, it's consummated in a way.
In a way.
That was, and that's the ending. I always knew that was going to be the ending. That was what was going to happen.
Well, the major question is, if you create these robots with emotions, then the idea is that we have some responsibility to them.
But we also have responsibility to ourselves, and that's what the ending.
He has to try and walk that line. To the human. So he's British Asian. At one point he refers to Shiva or calls on Shiva. I mean, I think, looking ahead 100 years, 100 years post-Empire, just there he is with all this reference to Christmas as well. It's just there's a full sense of integration. But were you attempted to make any more of his Hinduism or his Indian heritage?
It's there in parts, I think, but not particularly. That wasn't a driving element of his character. It was a deeper layer of him. But it wasn't really a conscious intention to create. It was a conscious intention to create a diverse cast of characters. It just made sense. It's a global story.
Sure. It's Londoners,
and it's London. It's going to be set in the near future. It's axiomatic that you're going to have a diverse casting characters. It's not just makes sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. No, I like that about the book as well. Yeah, seem to reflect the world as it will look. Yeah, and does look. So Tilda. So she's she's your cop.
She was originally a journalist.
Oh, okay.
But I couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
So she had to be a cop.
Yeah. And you had a friend also who gave you some insight into.
A friend Ralph, who's a copper in Birmingham, and he gave me again some good insights into some of the procedural stuff. Again, I wouldn't describe the book as a police procedural at all. Yeah. But just for some of those Tilda-oriented plot lines, some of the stuff needed to be correct. And I talked to somebody at the Home Office as well, an ex-colleague of mine who worked at the Home Office, who gave me a bit of guidance as to what happens in the civil service with the police as well. So drawing on, this is the thing, you've got to draw on all the resources that we have to put these things together.
Well, with her, we see her, she detests the dolls. And then gradually we learn more about her past, her marriage, and we understand why that makes sense. We see her cracking under pressure, toward the end, taking things out on her colleagues. So again, she seems the very complex person, and yet we obviously we're kind of rooting for her. She's trying to kind of clean up this corruption as much as she can. She also has quite a strong influence on Diraj's wife, on Sally. So she plays a role there in marriage counselling, I suppose. And thinking about family, I mean, science fiction, can get criticised for not taking into account family, but family is really, in a way, at the heart of this book. We see Diraj and his family. You've named the son Dan. And we also see Salazar, who's an engineer, sex robot engineer, who's kind of drafted into the underground to perform some quite alarming surgery on one of the dolls. It's a weaponization project. And he does everything that he's doing. He crosses all of his moral lines because he wants to protect his daughter and give his daughter, his 5-year-old daughter, a future. So how, you're married, you have a small daughter, two small daughters. So how much has that affected how you see the world, how you approach your writing?
Definitely. There's a lot of my older daughter Ava, she my experiences of being a father are definitely in that Salazar Lily shushu dynamic, definitely, absolutely. But the book, I said before, it's not a hard SF book.
No, I don't.
The hard SF bores me because it's all about the science. And what I wanted to do was write something which is how the science and technology has an impact on real lives, on. I was going to say everyday people, but not all everyday people, but a wide range of people, and they're all touched in a different way by this new technology. And I think, again, engineers do some wonderful things, but they don't always consider what are called the secondary effects of technology. And I think what's going on in stories like Man of War and Blade Runner as well, I mentioned that, are the secondary effects of introducing new technologies into society. So the engineering is all there and it's good, but it's really about the families, how it affects Diraj and his family, Salazar and his little girl, the Johnsons, of course. So that's what the book is about for me.
Well, when you consider that the tech industry is predominantly male and white, I suppose. But when you're looking at things like even facial recognition, it doesn't work so well on brown-skinned people.
Is that true?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I was in. I learned that recently at a talk given by in an art gallery down in Brighton, and it rang with something that I experienced in the summer, which was I was in Bethlehem and had been given a tour of the wall, and on the wall was mounted this facial recognition gun. It was an off-the-loop gun, so it could be programmed just to search for someone in the crowd, and no one needed to, it could kill them as soon as it spotted them over a distance of 1.5 kilometres, and it had a 65% accuracy rate.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
about that.
No, well, apparently it's not. It's actually just.
So he
it's
regulates
actually
us.
a prototype. It's a prototype. It would never. It should.
It's not going to go
yeah,
off.
it's. Well, it's just being tested. It's just being tested on a civilian population, basically. And then with the 65% accuracy rate, I wonder if that's to do with also, brown skin people. So what it seemed to me you've done in your book is you've given a voice to the women in the book, because the horror and the rage really is coming partly from, said, well, Tilda,
certainly.
Yeah. But I think.
It's funny, Tilda.
Yeah.
She started off. I had my the 5 characters: Diraj, Nita, Adam, Salazar, and D'Souza. And she was an afterthought, really. She was a plot device to start with, and by the end, she was my favourite.
Okay. All right.
So I was really sort of. So she won me over, and her scene on the bridge is my favourite. It was my favourite scene to write as well. But it seemed disingenuous not to have female voices in the book. And if you're going to write a book about how this is going to impact a wide spectrum of people, actually you've got to have 50% of the population has got to be in there, right? So
Well, I think
it's not. I didn't write Tilda or Nita as political statements. It makes sense to have women in the story.
Of course, but
and have their understanding, their interpretation of events.
So I think I was going to move on to Nita, but we talked about Nita. Do you watch Orange is the New Black?
My wife loves it.
Yeah, okay. So ask about
I've seen
Linda.
it.
The character Linda, who works for the prison corporation, and then gets mixed up with the prisoners during a riot, and ends up she kind of goes undercover, and then she gets stuck in the prison.
Okay,
Riot.
yeah,
She reminded me of a great deal anyway. So but moving on to Adam then, he's Nita's partner, if you like, in well-motivated crime. He's the willing dupe of his own powerful family, really, because initially I wondered about his. So he introduces Nita to his family, who's got his father Joseph has got the money, and he makes quite a compelling case for the dolls, whether or not they're emotionally activated or not, as ways of preventing the rape, at the very least in terms of prostitution, of the poor people in Nigeria forced into prostitution by what's happening. Though we're also here talking about the Marxist rebels, who he blames also for raping. So there's raping the population. So there's a kind of a confusion there as to whether these dolls are going to be there for the soldiers or are they going to be there for the Marxist rebels, but in which case, would the Marxist rebels not look on them with suspicion? So I wasn't quite sure there about, but Adam does make quite an eloquent statement there, saying, why should my family be blamed for the rape of the land because they're the oil barons? When it's other people, when it's these people who are doing the actual raping, and so what we're going to do is bring this technology that will put it.
Again, I think Adam's apart from he has a whole other familial motivation to his character, but I think he's quite idealistic
there was something sincere about that in his eloquence.
Sincere, definitely.
But then his family have their own agenda, obviously. And very, so as we read on, we realise what that agenda is, and that's where the weaponisation comes in. And even his sister, who's a very interesting character, Joanna, because she started off, she's kind of rebelled and gone off and become a Marxist, and now and supported the rebels, and now she's back in the fold of the family. So we're not quite sure we can trust her or not. And because by the end of the novel, I really wasn't sure what she was up to. But she does have this voice at the end of in a sense, reconciliation, and hope. Whether we can trust it or not, we really don't have a clue. But this is a Nigeria that's really a long way from, kind of the current oil conflict over oil there. So, in terms of a European company, Shell, versus kind of grassroots communities. So, obviously, Ken Saro-Wiwa executed for his, protests and campaigns. In what seems clearly to have been a rigged trial, he was accused of murdering chiefs in his own community, pro-government chiefs. And then it seems as though many of the witnesses, at least 2 of the witnesses, were paid to give testimony against him, and he and 8 others were executed. Conveniently got out of the way. That was in the 90s, and now we have attempts to sue Shell over oil spillages, but they've been told, I don't know if there's been any change in this, but they've been told that they can't sue Shell in the UK. They have to get justice in Nigeria, which obviously they don't feel like it's not going to happen. So in this cynical future, all of that conflict is now devolved into this extreme polarisation of Nigerian society. So
I would say in this particular region, Nigerian society is far too complex to tackle as a whole. But in this particular concentrated region, the oil region, for sure. So it's focused into a horrible and bloody conflict, which could happen. And the so-called Marxists really lost the Marxist
moral centre.
Which again, that makes complete sense to me, because the historical grievances going back to the 60s, they're referenced in the book when the government essentially stole the land from the historical peoples, then claimed all of the profit that is made off of the produce of the land for the government as well. So it's like doubly shafted the historical tribes and local populations. And nothing seems to be moving on that front at all. So it makes sense that this is going to become quite violent and quite bloody. And these are dangerous people on both sides. Not nice people, because the oil conglomerates, the Johnson family, are extremely protective of what they've got, and Papa Johnson in particular he's prepared to go to any
pugilistic Papa
Johnson. He's prepared to go to any lengths to secure his family estate. And the Marxists similarly, they will do anything to bring him down. So it was really an interesting conflict to write, but I don't think anybody comes off particularly well.
Well, they don't, and I suppose, as someone who, who's been involved in sort of activism, I suppose I kind of wanted to see, there's Mobo, who's the Marxist guru, charismatic guy, but I didn't, it could also have been, a member of Boko Haram, it seemed, I wasn't seeing that. Did they have the support, the local people? Was this, how?
Well, I think this is. I think
somehow there'd been some support in Germany through Joanna. There was some kind of international sense that this was the right side to be on if you were right thinking. But
but it's not as easy as that. And in the same way that it's easy to cast the oil conglomerate as the bad guy in a sort of fairly broad sense, but there are still good people working within the company, and Adam is. He's a bit of a grey scale fish, I suppose, but he's still got his good qualities. I think.
I felt proud of him. When you see his father, again, don't want to spoil too much, but his father's relationships with the 2 sons actually is quite reminiscent of Trump's father. I don't know if that played into your thinking at all, but he played Trump and his brother off against each other. Almost like in a biblical sense, like use your money, go out and...
Well, I didn't know that about the Trump thing, but Adam's brother is called Remus, and that was fairly intentional, giving him that name. So yeah, it's obviously there.
I mean, there was a very tender moment, I thought, with De Souza, who we'll get to at the end, I think. De Souza's interested in taking revenge on Nita, who is now in Nigeria, and forming a stronger alliance with Adam. So he's in a sense been picked up by the rebels, and proves himself in mortal combat, and so therefore is kind of allowed to stick around and in a sense join the rebel attack. And there's a moment there, with a local woman. There's a real moment of tenderness. This is where the John le Carré kind of side came out, I think, for me in the writing. I thought that there was something there about people trying to connect through all of these horrors and of history, really.
Yeah, well, I think, again, that was a really nice scene to write, and the scene in the tent. And for me, it was emblematic of the power of humanity to abide and to endure, and that you can't write off things that are deeply set within us through a radical piece of technology. That can change things quite spectacularly on the surface, and it does, but it takes a lot more to get rid of the fundamental aspects of our humanity and the ability to connect with one another. And so, yeah, the moment that they share in the tent was really important for De Souza as well, because he, excuse me, he's somebody who actively suppresses his emotional, well, apart from his rage, he's very angry, he's a very angry guy, but to be in the business that he's in, you've got to be fairly hard. But then life happens. Life happens to him, and he realises he needs some human.
Well, it's interesting because as after that scene, he starts to really be reflecting more on his childhood, really, and his mother, isn't he? So he's had some nurturing. He's had some.
It's always
maternal nurturing, and that's opened something up in him. Yeah.
It was always there. I didn't want to. Not with any of the characters, actually. I didn't want to make the past fully fleshed, charting, the exact steps they take. But the past, for anybody, it's not. We don't understand all of the dots that are connected in our past to get to where we are exactly now. It's a more gestalt thing than that. It's a kind of an abstract concept. So for him, it's a set of images that sort of swim through his head from time to time, or a remembrance of a time lost, and to which he could return. He says I can't go back to that. I'm in too deep. And in the end, well,
we won't. Yeah,
we'll see.
So I think I will say that Nigeria and Nigerian culture and politics aren't something I know a lot about, so if there's any people out on Twitter who've got particular questions about that area, that would fill in some gaps in my interviewing. But it was good to read, and it was good for me to actually go in and kind of refresh my memory as well.
It was good to research.
Of that.
It was good to research. I was coming to it fresh because I had the initial idea about Saudi Arabia. I was coming to Nigeria completely fresh. I got a friend, Chris, who's visited Ghana a few times, and he knows a bit about Ghana, but not so much about Nigeria. And southern Nigeria in particular is a wild old place. Port Harcourt, where the oil companies are, but it's a bit of a crazy place. I kind of want to go there, but you're discouraged from doing so, especially if you work for the government.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about sequels maybe later on. So, I've got a couple more questions left. You talked about it not wanting to make the book hard SF, and what I quite enjoyed about the book is sometimes things were suggested and not explained, like a 2-page explanation of a humidifier or an aerostat, like you might get in a Neil Stevenson novel. Not to name any names. but sometimes there's a sense of transhumanism here. We've got the robots and we've got the humans, but then occasionally you come across people who seem to have wires kind of coming out of them, and you wonder what's happening in the overlap as well. And that was left unexplained, and I quite like that. Was that? Am I getting that right?
I think it's to just touch on a point I said before. It's about another sort of secondary or tertiary effect of introducing a new technology. You might use it for bodily adaptations, and I think it's quite possible that there will be subcultures who would want to integrate technologies, especially where the technology becomes more humanoid. So, i.e., the advanced materials that are warmed through the magnetorobiological fluids and things like that. They'd want to integrate that into their own bodies. But it's also symbolic of that convergence between technology and nature, and whether that does any good. And the answer is, well, yeah, it can, but watch out, because you've got to be careful about these things. And there are characters like Collarface
and Spider-Man.
Spider-Man he's the sort of the archetypal symbol for me of that mashup of nature gone wrong and technology gone wrong, all fused into one character.
They reminded me, Spider-Man, because they are conjoined twins. Who were given the option of being separated, but told that one would die, and therefore chose not to do it, and have self-created, self-enhanced, themselves, and
home surgery is how they call it.
They reminded me. I meant to look it up, but kind of like Eastern European film, I suppose. Not Spankmeyer so much; it's a bit more rustic, but anyway, sorry, tangent.
I like tangents. We can explore it some more. What film?
Does anyone know what I mean? It's kind of this sort of sepia-coloured photography film. No. Anyway, sorry about that. I had a list of things to Google. And that one I didn't get to. So. Shall we, before I give my last question, do we have any questions on Twitter? Do we put out the call? Or shall I?
There isn't any that I can see. I've been monitoring it.
Okay,
but I'm sure there might be a few in the room here.
Yeah?
Possibly.
Shall we take a few in the room and then I'll give my last question?
Questions? Questions?
Yeah, questions, yeah. Or do you want to think and I'll give... Yeah, okay, no, you go.
Was this planned as a standalone book?
Yes, absolutely.
Has there been any pressure from others, i.e. publishers, for you to continue and do another one just like the other one? Please do another one, do.
I'm not going to write a sequel to it. As far as I'm concerned, all of the loose ends are tied up. There's enough open-endedness, I think, at the book that you can think about the characters and what they might do next, but not enough to warrant a second book, I think. I'm happy with it as it is. Having said that, please do another one, please do. My second book does have some thematic similarities to Man of War. Yeah,
thematic, but not sequel.
Yeah, it's absolutely not a sequel. Yeah, completely different worlds, different characters, but touches on some of the same themes, and structurally it's very similar too.
Thank you.
You may want to switch the microphone off for this one. Chatham House rules. You're with the UK Space Agency, and that's unaffected by the UK leaving the EU because it's a separate treaty. UK stays.
As part of ESA, you mean?
Yeah, ESA, yes. There's no issue with that. But the problem, as you know, is the UK is going to have to leave Galileo, which is a completely separate matter, and that does come under the EU, as far as I recall. Now, you may want to speak off the record on this, because they're going to have to set up their own system, aren't they?
You're just going to get the civil servant answer, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Which is that the government's put allocated £92 million for a feasibility study into a replacement for Galileo. So that's the answer that you're going to get, so especially while I'm going on. But actually, in the December 2017 agreement that was put out by the EU 27 and the United Kingdom government, it said that it was non-committal actually on the future of Galileo. So there's a possibility, a reasonably good possibility, that we could remain.
Stay in. Seems a duplication of stuff, you know.
Yeah,
Just daft. One of the results of this referendum and that. But anyway, okay. The microphone hasn't had to be switched off. Okay, so you might want to have spoken without, saying anything. Okay. Thank you.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Thoroughly enjoyed the book. I took it on holiday in Sri Lanka earlier this year, and I know you've got a Sri Lankan character in here who's actually one of the darker characters. I remember you chatting to you, and you told me about how you got inspired by.
Yeah.
Could you tell that story, please?
Yeah, of course. Well, my wife and I went on holiday to Sri Lanka for a few weeks back in 2011, and after staying in Colombo for a couple of nights, we took our car down to Negombo, which is a little way further up the coast from Colombo, and we were driving around town looking for a restaurant to eat, and there's beautiful, beautiful white sandy beaches, azure vault of sky and peerless sea, and we were driving along, and coming towards us on the pavement with this gang of youths, and they would. It just goes to show you that some things are universal, because just like a gang of youths in any country, they look like a bunch of wallies. And the guy at the head of them, he was this. He really, I can't remember what the other guys looked like, but this guy at the head, I'll never forget him. He stuck in my mind. He was dressed in, it was obviously like 35 degrees or something, and he was dressed in a full-length leather trench coat. He had huge, wild, curly hair and these big, staring eyes and a big grin on his face. And he had nothing under the trench coat. He had trousers on, but he had no shirt. He had his pecs out, and he looked like he was out to cause mischief. And I thought, I didn't know it at the time. I just thought, wow, he's a character to remember or avoid, or both. And when I came to the book, I needed a character from somewhere else, and that guy just popped into my head, and I thought, he's going in. So I don't know who he is, but he's in the book.
I think everywhere in the world you see these people that just stand out.
He really did stand out.
You don't really know
he was
their
definitely
story.
the leader of the pack.
Well,
he was the alpha male.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah. Well, that does lead quite nicely into mine, because I actually have two more questions, and the topic question is about D'Souza.
Oh, okay.
And, if you like, the P word. Now, when I did my PhD at Viper, I was told that I hadn't addressed the P word in my thesis, by which she meant poetry. Oh. I concentrated actually quite a lot on politics, but not on poetry. Okay. But as someone who actually has written a very similar scene in the Gaia Chronicles, I was interested to get to the scene of the gentlemen gird your loins, philectomy. So I tip my cap, if I may say.
That's a P word as well.
That's it. And then what you did, which I didn't do in the novel, I gave my character, when that happens in my novel, I gave him a voice in the hospital. But you followed D'Souza through, so sorry, we're well into spoiler territory here. You followed D'Souza through, and this is also part of the scene we just talked about with the nursing really that he gets from the woman in the tent. So you really took that on as a when did that come, and when did you realise it would be him? And in terms of the medical research as well, what can there be reconstructions? In my book, I kind of thought there could probably be reconstructions. What are the options?
Well, I didn't look at reconstruction primarily because it had no place in the plot, so there was no need to look at it. And D'Souza is a creature of rage.
As the original, then maybe you would have rejected it.
For 4/5 of the book, he's a complete creature of rage, Mr. D'Souza. So as soon as something happens to him, or somebody does something to him, he just wants to find who did it and make them pay and give them help. I knew it was going to be him, and before I started the book, or when I had the idea, I had 3 images come to me, and that was the very first scene where Diraj fishes Naomi out of the water, the middle scene with D'Souza, and the Maya doll, and the end scene with Diraj and Naomi. They were the 3.
You had the beginning of the end.
I had those 3 images very, very clearly in my mind. I thought I've got to get from there to there to there. Following through D'Souza's arc, and he, like I said, that guy that I saw in Sri Lanka, he was the alpha male. You could tell that he was the leader of the pack. He was the peacock. You know, he was strutting down the road, and I wanted to make D'Souza that guy. He was the absolute alpha male. You do not mess around with him. He's very dangerous. He's very intelligent. He's charismatic, and he's working in a very dangerous industry as well, very dangerous and illegal industry.
And he can defend himself. His weapon, in a sense,
he defends himself. And his weapon is extremely phallic as well. He is the epitome of maleness in the book, and then it's taken away.
Yeah, hyper-masculine.
Yeah, he's hyper-masculine, and he's dangerous because of it. And it's taken away from him, and again, it's part of the whole book, because you have sex robots introduced in society, and they're a threat to female sexuality, and we see that in Tilda, who feels that she's being replaced as a woman in society, and then the male side of it is that, well, on the surface of it, you're being catered to, but actually, it could very quickly turn out to be something highly unpleasant indeed, both literally and figuratively. But it had to be followed through all the way to the end. And the end point was that once his hyper-masculinity had been undercut, violently undercut, he was, his initial response is revenge, and he goes after Nita. And then he has the moment in the tent, and he starts to sort of reconnect with humanity. Now, it's very easy probably to read all sorts of symbolism into that you have to emasculate men in order to get them to connect, and that's not really the issue at all. It's not, but he's a hyper masculine guy, and you see hyper masculinity, and that can, that's not necessarily a very good thing. In the same way that
but in a sense, any kind of illness or disability puts us in a position of vulnerability where we have to accept that we need other people, and that's a challenge to hypermasculinity, which is all about, in a way, the ego, domination, and independent, the independence. So, I think it's an extreme example.
It is an extreme example, and it's a symbolic example. But I enjoyed writing D'Souza. It was good fun to write. Like Johnny. Writing these characters is good. D'Souza has he's working towards a redemption.
Absolutely, and that's a surprising arc, considering when your assumptions about him when you first meet him, or your expectations, if you like, about it when you first meet him, and where he actually goes. It's part of the kind of blossoming, I think, in this book. And I didn't at all mean to suggest that you're kind of just working out ideas through it. As I say, it's a fully fleshed at the beginning. It's a fully fleshed book, but nevertheless, I do feel like science fiction. It does function as this early warning, system for these kinds of technologies, and it does function not as an allegory, but as an investigation, as a theatrical kind of demonstration, if you like, of.
It's funny in the automotive sector, they always hark back to the difficulty is in the warning systems, and they hark back to the very early days of cars, of automotives, and you used to have a guy walking in front of the car about 5 yards with a red flag. That's essentially what science fiction is doing. That's in science fiction is the guy with the red flag saying, "Watch out, there's a car coming." But the cars, we all use the cars in the end, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, one more question, which is basically just what's next? What's next for Dan Jones?
Well, yeah, I intimated it earlier. I'm writing a second novel, Hole in the Sky, which is a science fiction with a smattering of fantasy and horror crossover. It's mainly science fiction, and it's about a psychitect called Grub. A psychitect is a very particular type of, a unique type of engineer who's able to download blueprints and designs for new life forms from their subconscious, and this is a good thing because it gives him a good job at a big corporation to create new life forms, because all of the biological life on Earth has been wiped out by a virus known as the crash. So this corporation has got him, and he's the only one who can do this, to create new life forms and then monetize them and then sell them on to the community. But he has a terrible accident at work. He's stripped of all his power. To do this, he's left with debilitating headaches and injuries to his arms. And he's sacked unceremoniously. So he decides to join a cyber terrorist group and take revenge against his former employer. But then it turns out that the cyber terrorist group may not be the clean-cut revolutionaries that they seem to be. Similar to the Marxists, I guess, in this.
Well, one other name I was going to mention was Wallender. I feel like crime stories that have got this sort of international and ethical dimension. So, thank you very much, Dan.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.